Today, we're very fortunate in having an international perspective, not just a narrow Thai perspective, although he understands and knows the Thai environment. This gentleman, Stefan Kundert, has been around. He looks to me like he's about 25, but apparently he's a little bit older because he's been working for like 30 years. So he's been with a number of organizations, primarily Novartis. We just met actually, and when I walked in, I said, don't I know you? And he said, no, I don't think so. You know, it's one of those, the generic type fallen faces and that everybody tells me we all look alike. Maybe we do. So he's going to enlighten us about different types of leadership and a new approach, I think, that will help us all to come to grips with the challenges of today's leadership. Please welcome Stefan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Generic face. Wow, okay. I have to put that into my CV. So, well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Alex, and to Sassin for inviting me. I'll start off with a little bit of perspective on myself, so you know who's standing in front of you. I actually am older than 25, but I take it as a compliment. I've worked for Novartis most of my life, so I don't know who of you knows the healthcare industry, but it's one of the bigger players in the pharmaceutical industry. I was born in Switzerland, did all my schooling there and my MBA in Switzerland, and then I joined Novartis relatively early on in my career, and I worked for them for not 30 years, but 24 years. Worked 4 different continents. And where do I end up? I end up in Bangkok because I like it here. I did 6 years in Singapore before I moved here. Was in charge of the OTC, so the over-the-counter healthcare business, so all the drugs you buy in booths and so on and so forth, for Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. So that was like a $1 billion business, 2,500 people. So hopefully, I'm sort of qualified to talk to you a little bit about leadership. And before I do that, I just want to say I left the corporate world 1.5 years ago because I actually turned 50 1.5 years ago, so now I gave away my age. So I turned 50, I said, well, I'm going to do something else with my life, something totally different, focus on my personal well-being, my family first, and then start something new. So I'm working as a strategic advisor right now, and I'm happy, for you to ask me questions afterwards about that, because it takes a little bit of courage to leave the corporate world at 50 when you're, sort of still on the up, but I don't regret it. But that's not the topic for today. So as I said, I've been invited for a talk on leadership. Now I'm stating the obvious. Leadership is obviously not an exact science, so there is no real right or wrong, and that's the great thing. So we can debate all day if you're in the mood. We can talk about what I share, and I think that's the enriching part, hopefully, of today. That I can share some of my personal experience portfolio with you, and we can debate it. You can ask questions, and you will be probably as right as I am if you disagree or if you agree. So that's what we're going to do. So I invite you to interrupt me when you have a question or something you don't understand and you don't agree with. Please interrupt me so we don't have all the questions at the end of my talk. Just speak up. Good. Who of you has heard the term VUCA word? Oh, putting you on the spot now.
Is it I think if I remember correctly, the meaning of it is to deal with, to know that there are uncertainties.
Yeah.
Uncertainties are everywhere, and you need to know how to deal with them. Yeah.
Exactly, very good. So VUCA is actually an abbreviation, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, as you just said, complexity, and ambiguity. All right, so it's a term that's relatively widely used, and I wanted to start off with it because I believe, I come from the corporate world, and I believe that, today's times are unprecedented in terms of competitiveness, in terms of transparency, in terms of flow of information, in terms of dynamism of the business world. And I do believe that the key in this dynamic environment is the power of the individual. And that's what I've experienced during my time in the corporate world. It's the power of the individual. It's the unique skills, the knowledge, the capabilities of the people in your organizations that you need to harness as a leader. Because only if you do that, you're going to have a sustainable competitive advantage. And as organizations realize that, I don't think all the organizations have realized that, but as they realize that, you've seen a shift from an environment that was centered around strategy, systems, structure, and that was all about control, okay, top down, big corporate headquarters, staff, that was making sure that everything was complied with, adhered to, control, contract, starting with the job description, with your job contract. If you adhere to your job description, you were fine. If you went outside of your job description, it was not okay. Right? That's the old world. I'm going to talk about the new world in a second. Compliance, but not compliance in the sense that you've probably heard of today. It was more compliance with policies, with procedures, with systems, and therefore you had a lot of constraints. Right? You had a lot of constraints, and what did all these constraints, the boundaries that the companies set up internally, what did that lead to? What do you think? Exactly. It stifled creativity. You were not flexible to react to the demands of the ever-changing environment. What else? What about decisions? You think decisions were taken quick? And to be honest, I've experienced that at the beginning of my career, 20 years back. Very bureaucratic environment, decisions to be taken, you're required to go to 3 different boards, and then when you were lucky, you were sent back once to do another analysis, and then you went back and tried to get a final decision. I'm exaggerating a bit, but I just want to make the point that as organizations realize you cannot be successful this way in today's world, they move to something which is based on support, stretch, empowerment, and accountability. Okay. So stretching the organization in a positive manner, unleashing the full potential of the organization with big ambition to win, trying to go for the slightly impossible, but at the same time supporting people to, to achieve those stretch targets. Okay, so these are actually two different sides of the same coin, if I might describe it that way. And support in today's world of the millennials, and you guys sitting here, millennials, generation Z, has a totally different meaning altogether again. In what sense? How do you need to support an organization, the organization to stretch, or people to stretch, when you think about millennials? When you guys are millennials, some of you.
SNS.
Sorry?
SNS, social network.
Explain that to me.
The millennium, like to, see the, social networking system to communicate with each other.
Yes.
So we tend to use the, kind of tools to
Yes.
support or to, promote those kind of.
Yeah. I mean, network society, the industry I come from, consumer health, is becoming increasingly important to talk about the e-shelf. E-shelf is electronic shelf. So it's not the shelf in Boots or in whatever pharmacy you walk into. It's the shelf you see on the internet. How many hits you get, how many reviews are written about your products on your site. So absolutely. What else? If you think about yourselves, when you go into the corporate world, if you go into a corporate job, you want to have a rigid 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
Lifestyles are different. For example, you might want more freedom, or
Right.
spaces to move. So in the organization needs rules or supports that, encourages or allows.
Exactly. Flexible working hours. Making sure that, I think millennials are more itchy. They want to move on, they want to change, not necessarily job hop, but maybe they want to go into another environment, other culture. So how do you actually support that? And again, harness the creativity and the strength and the skills of those people. Frankly, it's not easy. New incentive systems, not the old type of incentive systems, but all that comes with it. So when I say support, obviously that is part of that. Empowerment and accountability. Empowerment. So empowering people. What do you think that is? What is it to you? Empowering people.
Equipping your people to be more competitive or rich in skills.
But you set boundaries for them, or you don't? You do? Yes, I agree. I think it's the way I describe it as freedom within a framework. There is a certain there's still strategic objectives you want to achieve, which you break down into tangible steps, actions in the short term. So you cannot just say, okay, empower, do whatever you want, even though that exists. Google does it. They have some elements in the organization where they give total freedom. So there's you have 100% freedom to think about whatever you think is going to be good. So no constraints. But that's not the reality in most of the cases. So empowerment, but empowerment again, it has to be paired with something. And that's accountability, because people need to take accountability, in my view, if you empower them for achieving certain results. So you see, okay. So you see that you have, I think you have a situation where up here, the organization was like a hub and spoke system. So you had the hub, and then you had, so that's the center. It's, you know, top management. All the traffic was going through the center. Not possible anymore. So all of a sudden you're in a world where you need to be interconnected. We talked about social media need to be interconnected, so all of these people need to be connected with each other. So it's much more interconnected, interconnected networks rather than a hub and spoke type environment. And what you see here are obviously in certain situations are tensions. So they're opposing forces. You stretch someone, maybe you don't give the support. You give empowerment, you expect accountability. So in my view, as a leader, one of your most important roles is to manage those tensions, to get to a point where you have a certain balance between those forces. You can also think about content versus context, tasks versus relationships. And you know, you're from the sustainability space, sustainability versus progress. You know, there's lots of tensions you manage as a leader together with your team. Now, one of my favorite quotes says the following: you have to have the courage to change what can be changed. So the courage to change what can be changed. And you have to have the composure to accept what cannot be changed. And finally, you have to have the wisdom to distinguish between what can be changed and what cannot be changed. So again, is some of that tension, the composure versus the courage. Which leads me to the central point I want to make today about leading teams. I personally have applied a certain framework. You know, it's not rocket science, but I share that with you, a certain framework for growth that's based on two thrusts. So one is competitive leadership. And the second thrust is organizational fitness. Competitive leadership. How do you create growth platforms? And you want to do them, you want to create them in a sustainable manner. Platforms. External growth, organic growth, innovation, how do you pioneer? Then here, how do you drive commercial capabilities in your organization? Okay. Organizational fitness, operational excellence. What is operational excellence in your view? Have you heard the term managing the sweet and the sour? What could the sour be? So if you have an operation, what's the sour part? Managing the costs, for instance, right? Managing your expenses. What's the sweet part?
Profits.
Yes, ultimately, but you know how you get to profits? By innovating, no? By coming up with, creating new demand spaces. So sort of, that's a bit sweeter than making sure that your costs are under control. in the end, it's gonna, it's actually more the top line, it's the revenues. But in the end, you're right, it leads to better profits if the sweet part is gonna be much, much bigger than the sour part. So operational excellence, but now I really want to focus on the last one, which is really the people and the purpose. So, people for growth is what I used to call it, people for growth. So it's how do you select the right talent? How do you make sure you develop them? And again, we're talking about the generation Z and the millennials, how you make sure you unleash the potential. How do you create engagement amongst your associates? And engagement is really, it's really not just the willingness to stay, to continue to work for you. It goes beyond that. It's also the willingness to recommend, your employer to your friends, to your family. That's where you can, that's where you can measure real engagement. And so this part, the people for growth, I really see it as a puzzle of 3 pieces. You see that there, self, team, and business. So when I talk about self, I'm talking about the leader. So composure is important, courage is important. What else for a leader?
Leadership.
Well, what's leadership? Sorry? Commitment, yes, commitment. Oh, that fits well with the C's here, commitment. What else? What about some personal traits of a leader? Compassionate, yes. It's not that we're looking for only for C's. Huh? Compassionate is very good. Compassion, huh? Compassionate. You think so? You think it's important? I mean, if you work for a leader, you think it's important that that leader, she or he, is charismatic?
In some way.
It's better if he or she has some charisma. Okay. Charisma. I personally, what do you think about authenticity? I think it's very important to myself. What you see is what you get. That's the type of leader where you don't have to think twice. Is he just sugarcoating stuff, just sweet talking things, and then I have to go back and to my workspace and worry. So I think authenticity in a way to me is very well. Now I'm talking personally, but again all what you say is right. What else?
Honesty.
Empathy, very good one. Yes, empathy. What does that mean?
The ability to be able to understand the other's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So that we listen to them to
Yeah.
be
Not being.
like we should be able to listen to others' ideas.
Yeah.
Understand.
I totally agree. In the end, you obviously listen. You're going to be empathetic. Doesn't mean that you're gonna lead an organization in a totally democratic manner. It's not like, okay, what's the majority? Sometimes you have to make lonely decisions, I think, as a leader. But listening is important because it helps you come to the right decision. So I said authenticity. Self-awareness, I think, is important as well for a leader. So to be a personal learner, to where it comes back to the listening, to thrive on feedback, because I believe that people respect you for your strengths, but they actually like you for your weaknesses. So if you show people, you know, your weaknesses, and you show them that you're willing to learn and take things on board, I think it's you know, it's gonna mobilize your team much more than if you just, you know, try to lead them in an autocratic manner. Anything else?
Wow, passion. Passion.
Passion, yeah, passion. I think passion is very important. It's a good one, because without passion, you're not gonna be credible as a leader. You're not gonna be able to make the team believe in what you know, where the organization can go to. And if they don't believe, they cannot achieve. Anything else?
Forward-looking. Like having visions, joy and
Future-oriented, yeah. I think, you know, articulating a clear view of, you know, obviously it starts with, if you take the analogy of a bus, you know, you take a trip, you take a journey with your company, your business. You want to get the right people on the bus. You want to make sure they get into the right seats. But you also have to make sure you're not just starting the journey and they have no idea where you're driving. And so show them where you're going. Yes. Forward. What did you say? Forward. Okay. What else? Decisiveness. Yes.
I think approachability.
Approachability, yes, which, you know, is a bit linked to the empathy, you know, to be open for people to come and talk to you, and also be empathetic enough to listen, give feedback, you know, voice. You know, you don't always have to agree. You don't always have to say, yeah, this is right, but you have to show, you know, a willingness to accept other opinions. Oh, I get the sign here that I should not talk that much, I guess. Okay, self, I don't ask you anymore on self, but I will ask you a bit on this here. So let's do the business piece first. So I'll tell you what I think and you add to it, right? Or you. So here I think you need edge. So because of this VUCA world we talked about, you know, the competitiveness out there, you need to have some, you know, I used to call it smart aggressiveness, which is a very aggressive term, so people, you know, usually don't like it. It's, you know, to use Muhammad Ali's term of, you know, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. So you have to be agile, but you also have to be decisive. You have to be, you know, customer externally focused enough that you're not, you know, not neglecting what's going out there. So, you know, you want a business that has a certain edge. You want a business with a USP, with, you know, a unique selling proposition. You want a business that is entrepreneurial. What does that mean? You want to have a pioneering spirit. You know, again, it's coming back to what I said before. Not just control, constraints. You know, let people be creative. Let people come up with, you know, pioneering ideas. Enterprise thinking. Enterprise thinking. What's that? Again, it comes back to, I said before, contract. You know, used to be all about control, compliance, contract. If I had, you know, if still today we have job descriptions, Enterprise thinking is to go beyond your job description. You know, you think about the wider implications of what you do. Doesn't mean you're going to have to do the job of other people, but you know, I think you want a business where people think about the implications of what they're doing outside of their, you know, narrow area of responsibility. And you want, you know, you want a bias for action. Anything else? I take only two, and I'm going to move on. Anything else? No. Okay, let's move on. Let's do the team. Collaboration. Collaboration. Coaching. Coaching. Diversity. Again, you know, this list, you know, we could make these lists. I just, you know, share some of the things which I think are important. Diversity. Not only gender, by the way. This is not only gender. It's, you know, different cultures. It is much broader than gender. Debate. Okay, you have a team where there is an attitude that constructive debate is something positive, you know, for the outcomes. And under team, also committed conversations, which is linked to the debate. And committed conversations leads to shared understanding. Shared understanding. Shared understanding being like the foundation for, you know, looking at possibilities, looking at opportunities. Difference between possibilities and opportunities is this is the unconstrained. You know, then you start to, you know, to put certain constraints, catchable and so on and so forth. Actions and results. Okay, so committed conversations, I think, are very important in a team. You know, clear purpose of a conversation, so it's clear what you're talking about. Forward-looking, you know, forward, future-oriented, generative in nature. And in the end, and I'm coming to the end of my talk, in the end, all of this, you know, you want to get to an aligned organization. Alignment. And you have different levels of alignment. So you can say, can live with it. Is that good enough? So if you come to a decision, you have shared understanding, you come to a decision, and people say, yeah, I can live with that. Is that enough? No, it's not enough. Because it's not, you know, it's not strong enough in terms of owning the decision. The stronger one is ownership. Okay, you want ownership. You don't want buy-in. It's not enough. You know, you want them to own the decision. You know, after you've had committed conversation. Obviously, down here you have, you know, you have everything until sabotage. Okay. So these were certain concepts which, you know, from my experience, 20 plus years in a corporate world, have been very important. To recap, I talked about this dynamic world where, you know, the individual becomes more and more important to make a difference in the corporate world. Then the importance of balance. You know, how do you manage the tensions that exist in an organization, stretch support, content, context, and so on and so forth. How that leads to a three-pronged framework for growth or for leadership, with yourself, with the team and the business as the pieces of the puzzle. And finally, how to create, I haven't really talked about how to create alignment and committed conversations, but how do you get to a high-performing team that has those committed conversations and where people own decisions. So I'll end it with this and open it up for more questions.
Yeah, we've got a good 15 minutes for questions. Like, fire away.
To discuss that the center of this is the team, also the alignment of the team members.
Yes.
And usually people as individuals have different agendas and different interests.
Yeah.
Often there are sort of frictions in the team.
Yeah.
And I think all this alignment and stuff can only happen if there's trust in the team. So as a leader, how do you diffuse these internal battles, internal conflicts that might not be visible, but really act as a brake in all this process?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's difficult because you cannot, as a leader, you cannot address all those tensions between team members. But what happens often and is the enemy of a high-performing team is triangulation. So you have exactly what you said. You have two members of your team disagreeing on something, or maybe there is resistance to doing something, or even sabotage. And what one of them does, brings the problem to you as the leader and tries to involve you to solve. So that's why triangulation, and that is something which when we did with my team, always workshops with executive coaches, to address those sort of things, because it's as you say, it's very, very, very it's poisonous for an organization. So, but you're not going to solve. You're not going to get involved. That will be my ultimate statement. You're not going to get involved. You listen. It comes back to empathy. You listen, but you have to, and you can give certain advice, but they have to sort that out between themselves. Does that make sense? Or? So that's triangulation. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the best thing that somebody could do to support their leader? What do the leaders need?
The best thing?
That I can do to support my leadership. To have people that so I'm asking you
What is the best thing you can do to support the leaders? Well, I think part of it is obviously having the initiative and having the gut to speak up. Because if you're, there's often in organizations there's a certain fear, which can be created by the leader. To be frank, there's a certain fear to speak up. But let's assume the leader is a leader who's open to feedback. Then I think it's on team members to speak up and share what they think can be done better. Obviously it's all rowing in the same direction, which comes a little bit you have certain team members which might want to go in a different direction. But the most important thing is that is to have an environment where people dare to speak up, make their opinion heard. What do you think?
Well, that is kind of easy. I think for me, I'm not shy, so that has come by easy, and I've always done it. I think my boss has appreciated that.
Yeah.
But sometimes when there's you understand that the leadership has some faults, like they're not working as well as they could.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like maybe I could support in that sense, like the thing that I identify that are not going exactly as they should.
Yeah.
But somehow I never managed to do what I wanted. Like I lack of structures somehow to. So I identify the problem, but then I don't know how to then, in a very consistent way, to.
But you still need the courage to address it with your leader, because you're not gonna be able to solve it single-handed.
That are open to that, I've been always been busy, and I feel that they don't listen to me at all.
Yeah.
Then I look for a way out. Like I can't talk. No empathy, no two-way street. I can't.
Okay. You work for Alex, right? No, I'm just joking. I don't know him, as he said. You don't know him.
I'm just generic.
Yeah, he's generically.
I recently started working with Alexander.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well,
Last
thank
chance, we got a good chance to meet somebody who's got experience in both worlds, in the corporate world and.
you have there's one more last
question. From your experience, what was the most challenging problem or experience you've had as a leader in the Thai culture to get people to build a team for what was,
Well,
and how did you do it?
yeah, but I've not worked in the Thai culture. You know, I live here now. I was responsible for Asia Pacific. I was based in Singapore, so I never led a Thai organization. So that was an easy way out for me.
But can you give an example or like
Of what?
of how to work with your teams to like work as a team?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, so I think the question is she still wants to give an example of how I got the team to that's my whole talk was around that. But maybe I can tell there's obviously challenges. What I've experienced is the cultural challenges. So when you go into different cultures, can sometimes be much bigger than you expect. So I'm European Swiss, but there's some differences, right, between the Germanic part and the Italians are slightly different, or the Greeks. But I was posted to lead another business that was the medicines for animals. Okay, small and large animals in the U.S. So I became the CEO of the U.S. business at one stage, 2008 to 2010. And I thought, as a European, you go to the U.S. and it's virtually similar culture. And I think we have some Americans in here, so I totally underestimated the differences. And so I'm giving you a little bit a different answer. But what I want to say is that situational leadership, or understanding how people think in those cultures, is very important. So the difference in the U.S. was that, and the Americans here, please correct me, but I think Americans define themselves by achievement, whereas Europeans are maybe more critical, less opportunity oriented. But with Americans, you have to be very careful how you give the feedback. It's not as black and white as it is in Germany, or you're German, I think, or Switzerland. It's so you have to learn. You cannot just apply the same approach wherever you go. And there's nothing wrong. There's no wrong and rights again. But it's just different cultures. Australians are very egalitarian, so they don't really care if you're the boss or not, and they'll just give it to you straight. And so I think that is something I haven't really talked about, but that's important as well. So we can talk afterwards a little bit about the ties.
Okay, then, well, if there are no more questions, let's have a round for Stefan. You know, you helped me understand something. And I think maybe it could help everybody else to understand the same thing that has always bothered me, why Trump is so popular. And he explained it in one quick, very easily understood sentence. People respect you for your strengths, but like you for your weaknesses. No wonder they like the guy.
It's full of weaknesses. Okay.
Thank you very much for
Thank you. Thank you.